Have you ever stayed quiet when you knew you should have spoken up? I've been there, like the time I walked out of a tattoo appointment with a full sleeve I didn't even want. Oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing to admit. And why didn't I say anything? It's because I was scared of confrontation, of upsetting someone, and honestly, I didn't know how to communicate what I wanted at the time. So if this sounds familiar, you are in the right place. In today's episode, we're uncovering why finding the confidence to speak up is so hard, and I'm sharing the exact strategies you need to advocate for yourself without guilt, fear, or second guessing, so you don't end up with a full sleeve tattoo that you didn't want. All right, friend, buckle up and let's dive in. Hey there, you just stumbled into the Anxious Creative Podcast, where overthinking turns into ahas, mess ups become magic, and anxious spirals, totally part of the process. I'm Dawn Bradley, your messy, imperfect host, here to help you, the recovering people pleaser, the perfectionist, to stop chasing the unachievable and start embracing the chaos. Spoiler alert, that's where the real magic happens anyway. So buckle up, friend, because we're about to have some laugh so hard till you cry moments, a few hard truths to help you grow, and naturally a little, or let's be honest, a lot, of oversharing. You ready? Let's dive in. I have this full sleeve tattoo, and if you're watching the video, you can see it now, and I've actually had removal done quite a bit, twice on the lower part of my arm. And the reason for that is it's never actually what I wanted for it. I was going through a divorce at the time, and my tattoo artist was also going through a divorce. And I mean, probably not the best time to be getting a tattoo in the thick of separating and your life is in shambles and you're trying to figure out who you are. But I remember wanting a sleeve, but I didn't know how to communicate it well. And I didn't really know how to say what I wanted. And I remember when the tattoo artist started coloring in like the full background, and I had really wanted what I know now is patchwork tattoo, where there was lots of negative space, but I wasn't sure. I didn't actually have the vocabulary to communicate that at the time. And so when she started putting this full background of like deep, deep purple, I remember it being like a small little like patch, but I was like, oh my gosh, that's not what I wanted at all. I don't know what to say. And I felt so uncomfortable speaking up for myself. I felt so uncomfortable. I didn't want to upset her. I didn't want to offend her. And I didn't want her to think that I didn't like what she was doing. So I just left it and ended up getting like a full like half sleeve tattoo of something that I didn't actually want because I didn't know how to speak up for myself. And so on today's episode, we are talking about finding confidence to speak up for yourself without guilt. And I'm going to discuss with you the strategies to overcome the fear of confrontation and tools for practicing assertive communication that isn't aggressive. So welcome, friend, to the Anxious Creative Podcast. I am so excited that you're here. So why is confidence in communication so important? Well, whether it's in your business, your life, or your relationships, if you're not confident, you're not going to be able to communicate clearly. And if you don't feel confident, you're not going to be able to articulate yourself or even let them know that you don't know how to articulate yourself. When you don't have confidence, you're not able to communicate regardless of whether or not you have the vocabulary. Just like with me getting my tattoo, I wasn't sure about, is this going to offend her? And I could have at the time, but I wasn't feeling confident enough. If I would have felt confident enough being like, hey, I don't want to offend you at all, but I think we're on different paths. We're on different places. Let's just stop where we are right now. But because I had so much fear around coming across the wrong way, and like my biggest hack to learning how to confidently speak up for yourself without guilt is just naming your emotions to the person that you're talking to. Hey, I'm really nervous to bring this up. Or, hey, it really scares me. If maybe it's talking about a price increase with a client. Hey, talking about money makes me feel really uncomfortable. Or maybe it's about implementing a cancellation policy. I know that I haven't really talked to you about my policies before. Or maybe it's about talking to a family member about them talking about your weight. Or maybe it's talking to a partner about something that you need to communicate. Or maybe it's friends. This like translates everywhere in your life, business, and relationship. But we need to look at the fact that confident communication comes from having clear boundaries for yourself. You know what your boundaries are and you know where they stem from, and also being able to communicate it clearly. And Brené Brown, I believe, is the one that said confidence is born from vulnerability and courage and vulnerability. Meaning you have to take courageous action first and be willing to risk being rejected in order to feel confident. So if you want to be able to confidently communicate, that means being courageous and vulnerable in the way you do it. And it doesn't mean you can guarantee how someone will respond, but I will tell you this, when you learn to take courageous and vulnerable steps, you actually start to get, like, more often than not, the reaction you're hoping for. But then we often avoid or dismiss or passively aggress or tiptoe around, like, I don't want to upset this client, or I don't want to upset my partner, or I don't want to upset this friend. And we tiptoe around things, and then we actually create the conflict we're scared that's going to happen. And so if you learn to be courageous and be vulnerable and learn to communicate that way, you actually are more likely to get the response you're hoping for. And so it's funny how we almost create the monster we're scared of that keeps us from avoiding the confident communication. And I want to share an example of this. So just recently in my romantic relationship, I flubbed up. I did something that I wasn't proud of, and I made a mistake. And I remember the moment that I did it, I was like, oh crap. And I started constructing this story in my mind of how I was going to deny that I did this thing, or that I made a mistake, because I was so embarrassed. And I started coming up with this story of like, oh, I'll just say this instead. And like, it was all, and it wasn't something that was going to hurt somebody. Like, this wasn't going to hurt my partner. And so I knew that, like, if I just made this like little lie, it wasn't necessarily going to hurt them, but it was going to protect me from being vulnerable about making a silly mistake. And then I sat with myself and I went, no, Dawn, because honesty is a really core value of mine. Honesty is really huge. And I had to sit there and go, no, Dawn, if you are asking other people to be radically honest with you, you have to be radically honest with them. And so I texted my partner and I said, like, look, I messed up. This is what I did. I feel embarrassed. I feel ashamed. I'm scared this is going to upset you. I can't believe I did this. I fell into an old pattern, and it's not great. And I'm sorry. And I'll tell you, it took a lot of courage to send that, because I was like, I didn't want my boyfriend to come to me and be like, hey, did you do this? And then me have to react, because I wanted to initiate the fact that I didn't want to just be like, if I'm caught, then I will. I'm like, no, I'm going to be courageous and I'm going to be vulnerable, and I'm going to start by communicating. And so by doing that, I will tell you, after the fact, we had a really good conversation about it, and he was really understanding, and we worked through it. But afterwards I was like, oh my gosh, if I can initiate that kind of conversation when I make a mistake, or when I misstep, or when I don't do something that's in alignment with my own values, if I can do that, and that was scary because I felt like, oh, it was really shining a light on the parts of myself that I don't want people to know about. If I can do that, I can do anything. If I can have that conversation, I can have any conversation. And the confidence came after. I courageously owned my shit. I was vulnerable about the fact of, like, I fell into an old pattern. I'm not proud of what I did. I'm embarrassed that I did this. I want to run and hide. But I want to come to you because this is important to me, that I don't just react if you ask me, but that I bring this to you. And I'll tell you, the confidence, again, is born from courage and vulnerability. And that's an exact example right there, where we're waiting to feel confident to then do the thing. Well, when I'm confident, then I will. But that's not how it works. When you need to start communicating boundaries in your business, or boundaries with your family, or boundaries in your relationship, or when you're needing to have a hard conversation with a client, maybe you need to fire a client, maybe you need to raise your prices, maybe you need to have a hard conversation, maybe you need to break up with your current partner, maybe you need to, tell a friend that you're no longer able to hang out with them, or, I'm just coming up with scenarios that'd be hard conversations to have. When you need to do these things, it's not about feeling confident first and then you can. Confidence is a result from showing up, being vulnerable, which, like, I would say, like, being vulnerable is like being emotionally naked. In today's day and age, people are so quick to be physically naked in front of people, but will not be emotionally naked. Being vulnerable truly means emotionally being naked in front of someone, risking rejection, which I will tell you, rejection sensitivity is a real thing, especially if you have ADHD. But regardless of the outcome, the confidence comes from it, because if you can do that, you can do anything. And so I want to, I know that these are common fears of the rejection, or being perceived the wrong way, or someone misunderstanding you. But you need to overcome the fear of confrontation, which takes time. There's lots of fear when it comes to confrontation. And here's the thing is, when you learn how to compassionately communicate confidently, confrontation dissipates. There's things like, if you reframe it from being confrontational, meaning it's going to be aggressive, if you reframe it as in confident communication, that you are bringing something to someone, but you're not confronting them like, hey, da 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 da, but like, hey, I just want to have a conversation about my cancellation policy, or hey, I want to have a conversation about the way you comment on my body, or hey, I want to have a conversation about this aspect of our friendship. Can we have a conversation, rather than like, I just need you to know that you really made me mad, or you not showing up to your appointment, like that feels confrontational and that's why we avoid it. But when you have compassionate communication, when you know how to do things that are showing kindness, compassion, and empathy, that you're not doing something to or at someone, but you're doing it for them. Hey, I really care about our relationship. Hey, I really care about you as a client and I want to maintain this. Hey, I really care about the way we move forward and I want to have a conversation around this topic, around my cancellation policy, around my prices, around the fact that a lot of stuff's been coming up for you lately and you've had to late cancel on me a few times, or the fact, insert whatever it is. When you can bring it up, when you learn the strategies of compassionate communication, showing people that you're not doing something to them or at them, but you're doing it for them, it's a lot easier to bring things up. And you can have these confrontations that don't feel like confrontations. They feel like conversations with someone. And you can communicate your side and you can stay calm and you can discuss hard situations, whether it be in your life, business, or relationships, in a way that feels really good to you. And so I want you to remember that you have to find prompts and strategies for ways that you can bring up conversations that don't feel aggressive, but can still be very clear, cut, and to the point. So again, say if it's in your business and someone's been late canceling and no showing a lot, like, hey, I just want to have a conversation about all this stuff. Like, I'm really sorry all these things keep happening in your life. And I just want to have a quick conversation with you about it regarding my cancellation policy and come up with a solution that works for both of us. That way you can really find a way to work together. And I find the best way to do this is when I focus on me and the part I play and taking 100% responsibility, even when it's not my fault. So for example, a client no showing 3 times in a row, like, hey, I need to apologize to you. I realize I haven't made my policy super clear. And I also haven't been enforcing it. I actually have a late cancellation policy, which includes someone late canceling or no showing. And I've been letting this frustration build because I was hoping I never had to enforce it because I really care about you. But the fact of the matter is I haven't enforced it and I've taught you that it doesn't matter. And so moving forward from today, any late cancellation no show will be charged X amount. When you own your responsibility rather than being frustrated with the other person for their action against you and your lack of boundaries and following through, that makes all the difference. So let's talk about like the tools that you need. What is a framework for tools? Well, like I said, owning it and taking responsibility. But my favorite thing to share is my EASE method, EASE, is you want to empathize with how they might be feeling. Hey, I know this might be hard to hear. Or, hey, I know this might come as a surprise. Or, no doubt that you might be frustrated right now. Name the emotion they might be feeling and say, and I understand. And then apologize and own your part. That's the A. And stay clear and straightforward. As an ADHD girly, I like to go off and trail off into the abyss and like talk about 10 different things and overcomplicate, but stay really straightforward on the subject. And don't get into the details of like, you did this, because it's rarely about the thing on the surface. It's about the thing underneath. Like, hey, I know you're only 10 minutes late, or hey, I know you canceled at 25 hours, but like my cancellation policy is at 24 hours. Don't get into that. That's more of an issue of respect. Hey, I know that you've canceled totally within my cancellation policy, and I know it's been at the 25-hour mark, and technically that's outside of my cancellation policy, but I just want to let you know that if you can give me as much advance notice as possible, that helps me fill that spot, which then in fact helps my business. And so know that you don't actually have to do anything different, because if I hear this one all the time, if you're frustrated at someone canceling an hour before your cancellation policy is in effect, then maybe your cancellation policy isn't where it should be for you. If you're frustrated that someone cancels at 25 hours and your cancellation policy is 24, then you need to rethink, should your cancellation policy be different? Maybe it should be 48 hours because they're not doing anything wrong. Or you can have a more intimate conversation with your client around the fact that, hey, you've done everything right, but I'm realizing I need a little bit more notice. So There's no penalty, but it's actually hard for me to fill the spots within 25 hours. And so if in the future you can give me more advance notice, that would be really helpful. It takes courage to say that. That feels really vulnerable to say that, but that's how you can do it. So being straightforward. And then the last E of the ease method is being earnest, actually being sincere in this. And so you have to ask yourself, am I actually being sincere? Is this actually working? And so with all of this in mind, I hope this has helped you understand that you don't have to feel guilty about bringing things up. I think the reason why we feel guilt, or the reason why you feel guilt, is you don't have the tools to actually confidently communicate in your life, business, and relationships. And so if you want to have better communication, especially in your business, I have a free masterclass that you can watch on demand at dawnbradley.com/free class. It's all on how to double your income without doubling your work. And I give you simple strategies that you can do, including communication, and how to communicate in a way that helps you bring more revenue into your business without sacrificing how you care for your clients, and also addressing the deep emotional needs underneath it all. Because it's not about working more hours. It's not about putting more on your plate. It's not about more hustle. It's about more intention, more clarity, more compassion, and that will result in higher revenue. So go to dawnbradley.com/free class. Go watch the masterclass right away. You can binge it. But I want you to know that you absolutely can communicate confidently and assertively without being aggressive, and you will see a world of change happen in your life, in your business, in your relationships, and ultimately in your bank account because of it. Because the stress and anxiety of, oh my gosh, are they going to misunderstand me? Or, oh my goodness, like I don't want to say this or upset them. All that stress and anxiety is going to go away when you know how to confidently communicate, knowing that you're going to own your shit. You're going to apologize for your part. You're going to empathize with what they're feeling. They're going to feel heard and seen and valued, and you're going to feel understood. And you're going to have so much less stress that you're going to be able to have time to actually relax, because that stress you're carrying, that overthinking, that overwhelm is taking up too much of your time, friend. And it's not worth it. So I want you to really start thinking about, how can I take 100% responsibility over my life and my situations in the different areas of my life right now? How can I own it and take responsibility and let that be the starter? This is what my students in Rock Your Business are doing, and it's so freaking cool. Anyway, that's today's episode on how to find confidence and speak up for yourself without guilt. If you loved this episode, go ahead and share it with a friend. If you haven't subscribed yet to The Anxious Creative, please do so. We have an amazing lineup of episodes. And next week, I'm going to share with you why real communication starts with vulnerability and not ego. It's going even deeper than today. And we're going to talk about self-awareness, slowing down, and letting go of pride to have meaningful conversations. Thanks again for hanging out with me today on the Anxious Creative Podcast, friend. Remember, the magic isn't in being perfect. It's embracing your messy, wonderful, weird parts. So if this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend or tag me over on Instagram at Dawn Bradley. I'd love to hear what you think. And until next time, stay weird, stay messy, and most importantly, stay unapologetically you. We'll see you next week, friend.